or plays, however we think of them. They had the re-rating and now they're just doing nothing. So we're going to have to be patient here. But I think being long oil and specific oil plays ought to serve one pretty well as we go through 2021. And then we need to move on to the, what was it called?
Let's just call it the
crypto.
B word. Let's call it the B word.
Yeah, here's the thing. My founding clients were two of the earliest Bitcoin investors. And they're very, very sharp people who I helped a lot in 07 and 08, which is why they were my first client 11 and a half years ago. They weren't buying Bitcoin in the thousands or the hundreds or the tens. They were buying it for dollars.
Yeah.
And they're good fellas. And they were working on the architecture of all of this for a long time, but I never, frankly, believed it. I really didn't. I thought the blockchain technology itself and title transfer and ledgers and everything else struck me as something that could be very, very meaningful, but I was never totally convinced by Bitcoin itself. And then you fast forward to, say, 2015, and all of a sudden, every macro trader I know is involved or starting to get involved and talking up a storm. Now, why? Well, it moves. And the skills that you would have once deployed trading dollar yen, which would move 4 handles in a London morning, those skills are transferable to trading something like Bitcoin that's like all over the place. And one or two of them even confided to me later that they made more money trading Bitcoin through 2017 than they made in their frankly spectacular macro trading careers, which I thought, gosh, that's interesting. Now, fast forward to this year. What's the big change this year? Well, you know what? You can put any valuation on Bitcoin you like. But obviously, given it's trading at 19,000, there would appear to be more buyers than sellers around. And as tempting as it is to think that there's, and I'll say this euphemistically, there's a wee bit of hype around Bitcoin at this particular point. It is true to say that the institutional money is starting to arrive. Yep. And to be clear, I don't mean the hedge funds that have said we've got some and it should be in a portfolio. I'm talking about some remarkably conservative long-term investors who have, over the past several months, created or established their first Bitcoin allocations. And all it takes is one or two of these large conservative investors to decide, right or wrong, that Bitcoin ticks some of their hedging box and it's off. Now, the other thing is, of course, that this is like dollar yen of old, because you knew who the flows were, this guy's doing that, you could see the big tickets going through. Now, of course, the turnover is a bit less than dollar yen 25 years ago, it's Bitcoin, but everyone knows when the so-called whales are putting through a trade.
Yeah,
I don't mean the name, but all the Bitcoin cognoscenti can see that there's some very big tickets going through.
Yeah.
So what am I trying to say? The institutional money is starting to arrive. It will probably continue to come through 2021. So I can be skeptical about Bitcoin for a whole bunch of reasons. But I think that the demand is probably going to win for some time to come. And to my surprise, somewhat surprise, I discovered recently that I have indirect exposure to Bitcoin through, frankly, one of these very conservative but very good real money firms. That was a surprise, but there you go. It just shows how this is changing. But of course, that's the good news. The flip side of this is that some of the arguments that are being bandied about how central bank digital currencies somehow underpin the case for Bitcoin, I'd be very wary and very skeptical of that narrative because it's not true. Now, to be clear, if central bank digital currencies are about imposing negative interest rates. Fine. I think the three of us could imagine a whole bunch of assets that could do extremely well if that happened, or should I say accelerate further. Yeah. So yeah, maybe Bitcoin gets dragged along for the ride. But I'd just be very wary of these assertions that central bank digital currencies underpin Bitcoin, because that's not the way central banks think about digital currencies.
Speaking of that, it seems to me one of the risks that I don't see addressed when all the chatter that you can't escape on Twitter about this is it, and this is one of the risks that kind of keeps me from wanting to participate. I mean, and that is, it seems as though the Chinese are kind of determined to move forward with the digital yuan. Yeah. And since a very large amount of Bitcoin appears to be held in a small number of addresses that appear to be in China, I wonder, is that not a risk that one would have to consider, or you'd have to convince yourself is not a risk, of them deciding that they don't want the competition with their digital yuan and they do something specifically? It seems to me like they've made rumblings that perhaps they're not exactly Bitcoin friendly, which to me could easily turn out to be a big deal. Do you have an opinion about that?
I don't think, as best I can tell, I mean, that's the way we should always phrase any observation about the Communist Party of China, because unless we're on the Politburo Standing Committee, what's that, Grant?
Yeah, and Bitcoin.
And Bitcoin. Yeah. But unless I'm on the Politburo Standing Committee, any observations I make on what the Communist Party of China thinks, need to be taken with a grain of salt. However, I doubt that they're entirely enamored with Bitcoin, but that's not the point. The point is that China's DCEP, as it's called, Digital Currency Electronic Payments, is the biggest pending change to the financial system we've seen in, well, this will sound a little dramatic, but I think it's the biggest pending change we've seen to the financial system since Bretton Woods ended. And to be very clear, there is nothing benign about China's digital currency electronics payment project. There is nothing benign about it. And I've been spending a lot of time over the past 3 months in particular, 4 months in particular, on this DCEP thing. And 3 Fridays ago, I was very fortunate to participate in a call. And it was a phone hookup under Chatham House rules, and it had some extraordinary people on that call. And it was intelligence people, it was a very well-known central banker, treasury officials, all sorts of people. Won't say more than that, but people are on it. Because a bit late in the game, key people have realised that as much as the Chinese, and former Governor Zhou of the People's Bank said again today, oh, no. Our DCEP is no threat to dollar hegemony. No. It's exactly what it's designed to do. It's designed ultimately to do an end run around the dollar-based financial system. And people are realising, we need to have something to give people an alternative to China's DCEP, but we're years behind. Because given how rapidly this pilot program is rolling out, it won't be too long before, huge chunks of the Chinese economy are using this DCEP thing. Let's call it a thing. And then not long after that, any foreign business operating in China might well be obliged to open a digital wallet in the mainland using DCEP, and I would think that ought to raise a few cyber concerns. So this is an end run or attempted end run around the dollar-based financial system with enormous implications. And it is the DCEP rather than Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency out there, which explains central banks' enthusiasm for central bank digital currencies. So to be clear, it's not Bitcoin that is incentivizing this central bank clamour for central bank digital currencies. It is a belated recognition of the intent of China's DCEP, and they are way behind the curve, but I hope for the sake of all of us that their progress towards central bank digital currencies accelerates, particularly in the United States in 2021. Now, of course, that all sounds well and good, and I don't know when the impact of all of this hits. I don't know when the impact of all of this matters. But of course, we should never, ever underestimate the determination of the Communist Party of China and Xi Jinping in particular. So I'm spending an awful lot of time on this DCEP. I'm listening to a lot of people. I'm understanding the consequences. I'm trying to sketch out for my clients how they should think about it, what they should watch, and things like that. So it's not a thing that one trades, but it's something that one needs to be aware of. And I think of it as the biggest plumbing challenge that we've had in many, many, many years. It's basically an attempt to overturn the global financial system as we know it.
Silence. Okay.
Yeah, well,
it is the whole digital currency landscape is extraordinary, and obviously the gateway drug has been Bitcoin, and that's what's got people frothing at the mouth.
Yes.
And you know, I understand the case for Bitcoin. Absolutely, I do. I think anyone that has spent years looking at gold like I have understands innately what Bitcoin's all about. But there are plenty of questions that I have yet to have answered satisfactorily to me. So I'm not a disbeliever, but I have skepticism about me.
Yeah.
But when you talk about this DCP and what it represents, it kind of strengthens the fears I have about there being no way that Bitcoin can ultimately be allowed to coexist with these currencies. Am I reading that the wrong way or not?
Don't know yet, because I think it's an iterative process. My best guess is that given the nascent institutional demand for Bitcoin, is that in the first instance, as people read more about DCEP and central bank digital currencies in the West, that will actually serve in the first instance, right or wrong, to underpin the enthusiasm for Bitcoin. Right? That's my best guess. Ultimately, though, I think you're raising important concerns. Ultimately, I don't know what the timetable is. I don't know what Bitcoin might reach in the interim.
Yeah.
But to be very clear, the motivation for central bank digital currencies is not Bitcoin, it's not crypto. It's China's DCEP, because the West has finally woken up to like, oh my gosh, you mean they're trying to rewire the global financial system while we're distracted? Yes, that's exactly what they're trying to do. And they're getting away with it, right? And by the way, that's part of the reason why they sort of gave Alibaba and, well, Jack Ma in particular, a bit of sanding with Ant Financial, because you're not going to be able to operate this DCEP without the existing infrastructure that Alipay and Tencent Pay provides. So to be clear, I'm coming at China's DCEP, at least at the start of this year, from a cold start. But I've been reading extensively about it over the next 4 months, once it was made clear to me what this project is actually about. And look, so I believe me, I can understand that it might be a difficult period for Bitcoin if people eventually appreciate what this is all about and what's going on. But put it this way, if China's DCEP is up and running, and it's the only means by which foreigners can do business in China, and then hopefully hopefully we have some kind of dollar-backed alternative in the West, then hopefully, we can rewire the financial system without too much trauma. But I'm not sure where that leaves Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I'm not sure. But I want to be really clear.